Jake Fischer joined Yahoo Sports last year as an NBA reporter, senior NBA reporter, after covering the league for Sports Illustrated, Bleacher Report. Jake has an article out in Yahoo a couple of weeks ago that prompted us to give him a call and say, hey, come on to the Voice of the Nets. It was an article entitled, While Mikal Bridges is the talented, malleable force players want to roll with. And just your use of the word malleable makes me want to have you come on the Voice of the Nets, Jake. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, Mikal is a really talented player. He's got a really versatile skill set and just a glue guy personality that you don't see in too many all-star caliber players. So he was someone I wanted to highlight a little bit.
Yeah, and malleable. He's able to be mouthed, whatever that means. But I know what you're saying. He's kind of you talk about a glue guy. It was interesting the other day that he went on Taylor Rook's podcast and said, he'd been disappointed about the way he's playing defense, that he knows he has this defensive reputation, and yet, maybe trying to be that offensive player, he's lost a little bit on the defensive end. I think more so than the subject matter of how has he been defensively, I think it more speaks to his accountability and being a leader, and really what's at the core of what the Nets seem to have in Mikal Bridges.
Yes, definitely. And that's something that Jay Wright, the former head coach of Villanova, who Mikal won 2 championships with, that's something he told me, not just about Mikal, but about Jalen Brunson and about Josh Hart and other Villanova players that have had success at this league level. He said in particular with Mikal, though, that, he wanted to make sure that Mikal stayed true to who he is. And that's definitely being that lunch pail guy on the defensive side of the ball who, no matter what, is going to be able to make a winning play for you. And that was something that we've seen him be able to do from being just a freshman on that first title team where Chris Jenkins hit that game winner to then when he had a significant upperclassman role on the team that just kind of steamed through the NCAA tournament in 2018. So, yeah, I think it was also interesting in talking to him and hearing other people talk about him when he just first came to Brooklyn in general, and the idea of him having to take more of an offensive role. He didn't look at it as an opportunity to just like go get his and become a star. He really looks at things so simply as, well, in order for us to win, someone's got to score 10 more points. I'm like, I think it should be me. It sounds
looking around
cliche.
the room.
Yeah. It sounds cliche. It kind of sounds a little bit like what you're supposed to say, but he is a guy who does look at the game and look at a team structure as what you're supposed to do. And that's to overall help the winning goal of the entire group.
Well, he also got a little taste of it and maybe a little confidence that he could be that scorer his final months there in Phoenix when Devin Booker was out with an injury. They asked Mikal to do a lot more on the offensive end, and it was something he was kind of blossoming into, and I think you could see that he enjoyed it and then carried that over when he came over to Brooklyn.
Devin Booker was hurt. Jay Crowder, if people recall, was not even with the team after Monty Williams said that Mikal and Cam were going to be starting. Yeah. So, and Cam had a hip injury himself. So there was a ton of opportunity for him to work on the ball. And he said it to me. I think he said it on Paul George's podcast over the summer that the deal came at the right time of his career because he was kind of not auditioning, but kind of rehearsing for that elevated ball handling opportunity that Brooklyn gave him upon day one.
He likes to go to that left side of the paint. He has that shot where he's kind of falling back and away to his left along the baseline, but he's got such great touch. But guys are going to start to attack that. And I understand, and I think he has that self-awareness to know, though, that that's something he's got to work on.
Yeah, he does have his pet shots. Like you can kind of close your eyes and think of him taking a couple dribbles and hanging and fading in the lane, and
with those long arms, man. Yeah,
long arms, and with the long legs, he's got. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a highlight of him in the open court, not Euro stepping his way into a finish. He's always kind of using that tricky footwork too. So the ball handling aspect, I think with all that length, it's been easy for him sometimes just to use his body and a control of the ball to get places. And now that he has the number one defensive assignment, I mean, it's something that it's a very different situation, but something Jordan Poole is dealing with in Washington. And when you get those types of defenders, when you get, I have the Raptors game up right now because I'm watching it, the Cleveland game. I've been watching it all background today before they play Brooklyn tonight. Like when OG Anunoby's on you, when Lou Dort is on you, when players who are of Mikal's class are now in your own pocket and trying to crowd your space, it is harder. So I do think he's taking on that challenge well. There's going to be growing pains for sure, but I'm bullish that he's going to continue to uh, progress in that area.
The thing that makes Mikal, though, unique is that, unlike Jordan Poole, who may be now at the top of the scouting report for other teams offensively, Jordan Poole was never the guy guarding the other team's best offensive player.
For
Mikal
sure.
can be that guy. Nets have other guys that can do that, which I think helps him in that regard. But, he's called upon now to guard the best perimeter player on the other team. And you talked to Jay Wright for the article. I talked to Jay Wright for the podcast back during the summer, and he said, big thing was, can Mikal stay out of foul trouble, which he has done, but it does take a lot out of you. There's a reason why guys aren't always the best on both ends of the floor. Unless you're LeBron James or Kawhi Leonard. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do because I think Mikal could it's you save a little energy on the offensive end when you got to dig in on the defensive end.
Especially in today's game where he's guarding perimeter players, he's guarding Damian Lillard and he's guarding Donovan Mitchell and he's just guarding a lot of jitterbug, high pick and roll point guards. You're slamming into a 7-footer who weighs 260 to 280 pounds, play after play after play, whose their whole job is to stand there and crack you. That's not an easy thing to do when you can see someone like Steph Curry can kind of hide in the corner and wait, and then he gets to run wild on the offensive side of the ball.
And the thing you point out when you talk about that with Mikal, obviously one of his greatest abilities is his availability. I mean, every game of his NBA career, his college career, going back to high school. And it's not like the guy doesn't have any bumps and bruises and couldn't maybe use a day off here and there. But his ability to stay on the floor, I think also, sets the tone. I mean, you talk about building culture. I mean, he's a culture guy. I think he kind of sets the tone in that regard too.
Yeah, and that's kind of really why I wanted to highlight him, because if we're thinking big picture, and everyone in an NBA front office is, Mikal is someone that I think Brooklyn was really excited to have for who he is, but also for who he could help attract, who are going to look at what the Nets are building and look at maybe what Cam Thomas can continue to become once he fully becomes healthy. Ben obviously is having some continued back issues, but Simmons was starting to showcase some more fluidity and whatnot. But I do think, regardless of the other foundation behind him, Mikal is a guy that I remember Milwaukee years ago before they went out and got Drew Holiday. They wanted to trade for Bogdanovich in a sign and trade with Sacramento. Some early reporting came out, the deal got quashed. But Giannis looked at Bogdan and said, "That's a guy I want to go to war with. That's a guy I want on my side." And Mikal is definitely someone who plenty of stars and plenty of just top talents are going to want to look at in that same way. I saw it when I was in Manila for the World Cup all throughout this summer in August. He was one player that had a secret handshake with every single guy on the team. He was the favorite of the coaching staff. He was the last starter Steve Kerr would leave in for bench units. He is just a guy that a lot of people want to be around for his personality, but also for how he plays on the court.
He's an energy giver, Jake. He's an energy. There's the energy givers and there's energy takers. He's an energy giver. And you saw that. You mentioned his time in Manila. I mean, just go to that. Let's go to that. I mean, going and playing for Team USA in the World Championships. I mean, he was added to that team for a reason and kind of fit next to Anthony Edwards. And you could see what, if we look at the forest from the trees right now with this net team, you could see that role playing out. And that's how you kind of want the Nets to model what was going on. I know the U.S. team didn't have the results that they wanted. That was no fault of Mikal Bridges. And even Anthony Edwards, I think, benefited from playing next to Mikal Bridges.
Yeah, he's going to take the top defensive assignment like we talked about. He's going to be able to knock down open threes and provide space for a primary ball handler. He's going to be able to relieve that primary ball handler and go get his own. He's going to be in a run, pick, and roll. He can set the screen and be a roll man for that guy and make plays and keep the defense honest. To go back to that word malleable, he is such a versatile weapon on the offensive side of the ball, and he likes to let you know about it after he hits a three-pointer.
Which is something in your article that you wrote about Mikal that he got from Campaign, right?
So Campaign back in Oklahoma City, people may remember, was pretty infamous for his pregame dances with Russell Westbrook. And so it seems like the handshake and these kind of ritual things that, it's 82 games. It's, these guys are all blessed and lucky, and they feel that way and grateful to have their jobs, but it is a grind to get up night after night, and you're in your fourth city in 5 nights, and you don't remember what hotel room you're in, and you don't even know where you're going the next day. You're just trying to get through what's in front of you. To be able to have some type of fun connectivity, something that gets you going and gets you hyped for a game, is important for these guys. And Cam and Mikal were always sending little hand gestures and whatnot that they saw on Instagram. And Mikal apparently one night sent Cam a video of a baseball team kind of making a similar, pistol gesture towards the dugout.
I think it was Manny Machado with the San Diego Padres. Yeah.
There you go. I was not able to confirm the detail of what team it was, so that's some good co-reporting by you. And I think from there, Cam kind of helped him with that head wag, and it just kind of blossomed. It turned him into, I think, even more of like an established. This is a type of guy in this league that you're going to have to care about and really pay attention to, and he's going to be on the opposing scouting report.
And I also think this is the other part of it. And sometimes when he does that celebration, he'll do it to the crowd. He'll do it to his bench. He'll look to the other team's bench sometimes too. Guys are chirping usually on the bench, especially if he makes a three from the corner in front of the opposing bench. Yeah. I think if there's one, and you could see if you share this assessment with him. If there's one misconception about Mikal, is that he's just this super nice guy who, if you hit him over the back of the neck, that he's just going to smile at you and shake your hand. Like, I've seen him when he gets hit or he doesn't get a call. Like, there's a little edge part of Mikal. He's a competitor.
For sure. And you wouldn't get to this level of play without having that fire in you. I honestly, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on which game it was, but there was one game in the early stages of the tournament where he just came out and he was the reason that USA won. He scored something in the upper 20s. I remember asking Jalen Brunson after the game, because to me, it was such that team needed someone to go do that. They needed someone to not care what the situation was and just go out there and get buckets. And that's what he did in Brooklyn. And people weren't expecting it. And he wasn't the guy on that, people thought Jalen Brunson, Brandon Ingram, Anthony Edwards. Like, there were plenty of other high-scoring options on that team that were supposed to be the ones to go get the Americans a bucket when they needed it. And it was Mikal who stepped up and did it. And I asked Jalen about that. When did you see that killer instinct in him? And he said he's always had it. Like, from day one at Villanova, he's been like the hardest guy going in practice, the one that Josh Hart was having problems with, and they would get in like little skirmishes. Josh would foul him really hard on fast break runouts because they had like a Big East, no layup rule. But you don't really do that in practice. But Mikal was such a good defender that it bothered Josh enough that he had to, kind of pay it back a little bit. So he's been that type of fiery competitor for a long time.
There's a great quote I always said, don't mistake kindness with weakness. Mikal's a kind guy, but he's a strong character when he's on the court. We're talking again with Jake Fischer, Yahoo Sports, and looking forest from the trees here again, outwardly, these are all the things that maybe make Mikal attractive to play with other players may want to play with him. He doesn't really seem to, at least outwardly and publicly, kind of downplays that aspect. We don't know what he does privately in his relationships with players around the league, but he seems to be a guy that's like, well, the process, control the process, and all that other stuff will take care of itself.
Yeah, again, he kind of speaks in cliches because cliches are simple, and he looks at this game and this world very simply. If I
Mm.
win, if I work hard and build something here, someone will want to come join me. I think he is wanting to walk the walk and kind of use what he does on the court as an advertisement as opposed to someone who's talking bigger and louder than his bite actually is.
Yeah, and I also struck me when he first came to the Nets is we talk about his self awareness and that simplicity. When he got up there on the podium with Cam Johnson the first night they were introduced to the Nets media, and he basically was him and Cam were like, well, we kind of knew, like, we got the idea in our head a while back that we might end up in Brooklyn, because if Kevin Durant wants to go to Phoenix, we're, we're going to Brooklyn. Like they were aware of that. They had that self
For sure.
awareness, and yeah, and then it didn't seem like it was he was shocked and he was upset to leave his friends, but it seemed like he really was eager to embrace the challenge. And he had gotten used to it for a while, I think.
He's an East Coast guy. I remember he really wanted to go to Philadelphia on draft night. His mother had worked for the organization. He's from
Yeah,
Philly. Big Phillies fan. Like when I interviewed him, I remember it was the day of Game 3 of the World Series, and he had a big red Phillies hat on. He's a Rams fan though, which is interesting.
yeah,
He fell in love with the
not an
greatest
Eagles
show on
fan.
turf by playing Madden, and he's still a Rams fan to this day, which doesn't make much sense to me when the Eagles are what they are. But that's neither here nor there. So I think the East Coast reunion. He does miss the kind of West Coast NFL schedule, though. He was telling me that. But
Yeah.
I mean, and also being across the pond from his former teammates, like not across the pond, you know what I'm saying, across the East River. Like I do think being so close to Jalen and Josh, like they have a competitive like fire there about like who's the best team in New York. I think that's a nice challenge that he likes and thinks about too.
See, Jake, you're in Brooklyn, right? You live in Brooklyn.
I am. I'm coming to you from northeast Williamsburg right now.
Yeah, so Manhattan's across the pond. It's
Yeah.
another. It's there's a, the rivalry is even heating up even more now that the Nets are in Brooklyn. Yeah, it is a pond or a pool. But but I will say this though about you mentioned him that rivalry, that grit, that wanting him to come and play. I think it really comes into play with Mikal, um, with his desire to win because he won at Villanova. Here's a guy that won two national championships at Villanova, and some guys can make you relax and be like, well, I've already won. I don't know, or it spurs you to know I want to continue to win. And I think that's something that drives him as well. I think that Villanova, Jay Wright, Jalen Brunson, Hart, like those guys, that drives you to win.
And he came 2 games shy of winning the finals too.
Yep.
Don't
Yeah. Got a
forget that.
taste.
That's something that I
Yep.
think sits with all the guys. You know, from Devin Booker to talking to friends I know at the coaching staff to some front office guys like Chris Paul. Like people there really they were up 2-0 and they lost four
Yeah.
straight. And they watched Giannis become the darling of the league and the world. And a biography that came out about him became an instant bestseller when they were right there. And I think also like being around Chris Paul in particular for that young team, it's one thing to win games and be a winner, but to really lock in on all the intricacies of the 360 degrees of a game, from the officials to all the people in the stands to
Mm.
all the little inches and margins that other people might not think about. Mikal got a masterclass in that, and they almost won it. They got right there. So he has that taste. He wants to get back to that level. And anytime I've talked to him this season, whether it was from the crowd at his media day to one on one to just like lingering in the locker room while he's doing stuff, everything's about the playoffs. Like he has a one track
Yep.
mind of making a winning culture with this team. It's not about, oh, let's just go out there and play. Like they are there to win. They're there to make the playoffs. They want to make noise in the playoffs. I don't think anyone around Brooklyn has like delusions of grandeur that this team right now is presently comprised is going to be as formidable as a championship contender as other teams in the East right now. But they think of themselves as just as good as anyone else, like right behind that like top tier. And I think that's evident in the fact that we're recording this on Tuesday the 28th. Like they're right in the thick of things for the in-season tournament, And if
Yeah.
they get in that environment, I would be really curious to see how strong this team can look in a single elimination type format.
Yeah, and I know just from hearing from fans this year, coming off the superstar era, there's a there's a sense of this is a team we could root for, and Mikal is a big part of that. They just we want a team we can really get behind, and it's a team that plays hard every night. It's a team that is never out of a game, and there aren't really a lot of there aren't a lot of easy games in the NBA anymore. I feel like the
No.
talent load is spread out. The good there's a lot more good teams, and we talk about guys wanting to join other teams. I don't know. Do you see a lot of movement coming up? I know we saw a little less last year. More teams feel like they're good. I feel at this point.
Yeah, I do think we're going to see a lot of movement, but to your point, more like down the scale. There's a couple of factors where the play-in tournament absolutely has more and more teams thinking, well, we just got to get the 10 seed and then we have a shot.
Hmm.
So you already have, just by definition, a larger number of teams that are looking to make improvements.
Yeah.
And in this particular season, there's been a lot of talk from my conversations with scouts and executives around the league that this upcoming 2024 NBA draft is not exactly expected to have real top tier talent. I think we could see a lot of teams trade a late first in this draft, a pick that's expected to be in the 20s, to go and get a fifth starter, to go and get a sixth man, to go and
Hmm.
get like a seventh man who's just the missing piece that maybe he's in your closing lineup. I'm even wondering, do we start to see some deals go down in December and January as opposed to February because the standings are so locked up? And like, do you want to
Yeah. Don't
keep
wait.
waiting around and pausing for your charge up the standings to cement yourself in the playoff pecking order? I think there will be movement, but to your point, I'm not expecting to see Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and then James Harden and the Domantas Sabonis, Tyrese Halliburton deal from a few years ago. But largely, yeah, this does seem to be a league where we've got 20 to 25 teams right now that really do think they've got a shot to make some noise in their conference. And I do think a lot of those teams are going to be trying to add just a little bit more to what they currently have.
Even Jake, when you look at last year, the Heat coming from where they did, as an 8 seed and going through the play-in stuff and, being losing the first play-in game and then being down in the second half of the second play-in game, and they end up going to the NBA Finals. So, yeah, there's more hope, and that is considered. And that's probably a little bit of, you wrote a book a few years ago, Built to Lose, which was about the how the NBA tanking era changed the league forever.
Yes, sir.
Um, right? So a little plug for your book, first of all,
Thank you.
and I'm sure you can still find it wherever you get books today.
It's definitely
And
available.
and there's no, for like the Nets situation, there's no reason for them to ever want to decide to lose because they don't own their own picks. They own other people's
Mhm.
picks. And the play-in tournament has kind of helped in that regard too, where teams think they have more of a shot going forward. I want to know, did you explore? I had a simple solution for tank. I don't know if it's so simple, but get rid of the draft. I'm sure that it came into your mind, and when it came to when you're analyzing what tanking did in the
For
NBA.
sure. I had conversations with people around the league for 3 years about the subject. So it's one of the natural secondary talking points is, oh, how do we fix it? Right. Just like, and this is a pretty stretched analogy, but I was writing it during the early days of quarantine when you were catching up with any friend, it was like, all right, it's pretty typically conversations would drift towards, but like, well, how do we solve this thing? Even though it wasn't up to us. So
Yeah,
I think it's that same type of psychology of like, well, there's a problem, there's something that's clearly not working. Well, how do we solve it? And I think from my assessment, like if you want to get rid of tanking, which I don't necessarily think is a problem, like there's always going to be a bad team. There's going to be someone who's losing 60 games or 55 games that if it's someone who's wanted to do it intentionally, I don't have a big of a problem with it. But if you do, which I also, I understand, like the spirit of the sport is to try to win. It's try to go into an arena every night and
yeah,
expect that your team can accomplish the task at hand. It's not about going and rooting for a loss. Who wants to pay, the escalating prices of today's live event culture to just expect a team to lose. So I do think the only way to get rid of the issue would be that you need to detach the record and the results from the draft order or from the way that players come into the league. So whether it is getting rid of the draft and you have some type of restricted free agency, or you do something like the wheel proposal that Mike Zarin in Boston suggested years ago, I do think that those are the only real ways to get rid of tanking, because then there's no reason to lose.
What's the wheel proposal?
The wheel proposal would be kind of like the in-season tournament where every team got separated into 6 groups, but instead of them playing games, there'd be 6 individual lotteries. And so every year you'd be ranked between 1 and 6, there'd be a lottery. And then the next year you'd be ranked between 25 and 30, and there'd be a lottery in every group. So you still got the TV event, you still got the ping pong balls, you still get the fanfare, but you're going to know for a 5-year scale, you're picking 1 through 6 in 2023, and you're picking 25 through 30 in 2024. And then in 2025, you're picking 6 through 11 and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so it's like a snake draft in your fantasy league where you know where you're picking, but it's not affected by your wins and losses. That's fascinating. That's interesting right there. I know that getting rid of the draft would be with the Players Association, and what do you do with teams that have accumulated draft picks, 6 years out? That would be very complicated, but hey, figure something out, right? Give a little credit or something, you get a little extra salary cap space if you have, depending on how many picks you have, but I think it'd be like, let college players play wherever they want, as long as you got the cap space.
Oh, I agree. I think the one issue is, all right, well, the Lakers then all of a sudden just get every star rookies. Victor Wembanyama going to LA, and then Cooper Flagg's going to LA. And then so maybe there would have to be some type of
still need salary cap space though. Yeah. You still need space. So
yeah,
you want to clear out your space to get Wembanyama, go ahead. But anyway, Jake, we really appreciate you've been generous with your time. Enjoyed reading your article and getting to talk to you here. Yahoo Sports, why Mikal Bridges is talented, malleable force that players want to roll with. Have you rolled with Mikal anywhere in Brooklyn, by the way?
No.
Like when he's gone to the bodegas and made those sandwiches and stuff?
No, I would like to though. I mean, I pitched watching football with him for the story, and it was politely declined. So it's okay.
Well, maybe it had more to do with the way the Rams have been playing this year, and I do know you mentioned the Phillies. We were actually in Dallas for the start of the World Series, Game 1 of the World Series, but the Phillies didn't make it to the World Series. They were beaten by Arizona.
Right. It was the conference championship. I'm sorry.
It was the league championship. But he was ready because we were staying. We had 2 days off between Dallas and Charlotte.
Yeah.
The Nets were actually going to be in town for Game 2 with no game. So he had already set up, like he was bringing a lot of people to the game. Like they were going to game, a suite, watch the game. He didn't get to do it, though. He was a little disappointed. Yeah, he is. Jake Fischer, thanks so much, man, for joining us. Really appreciate it.